theoretical kind of a thing. It should be very practical, and it should be carried forward by a child throughout his or her life. That's what the aim of schooling should be. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so in our earlier sessions, it was which was taken by Dr. Anju, Praharsh, and Seema. What we have seen is development of children in the middle school, that is a concrete stage, is physical, cognitive, social, moral, emotional. But then we shouldn't be in this. We shouldn't be in this assumption that development happens one after another. We shouldn't sequence these developments. These developments happen simultaneously. Next slide, please. Yeah. So what is this? What is this development? As I told you, all these developments happen simultaneously, and a physically maturing child is also maturing socially and cognitively, emotionally and morally. Of course, the
Okay, your voice is broken now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Harsh, but not Mridula.
Yeah, Mridula.
Hello.
Yeah, your voice is broken after, I think, the first line.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
now we
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now it's clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens is, what I was telling was, a physically maturing child is also maturing socially and cognitively. And there is also another angle, emotionally and morally. So this will happen in varied degree. That's what we have to notice. It's not like he will understand everything at one shot, or his personality can be noted just right now. Nothing of that sort. And from where is this influence coming from? It is coming from the family. That is the inner circle of the child. And then it is coming from the society, that can be considered as the interface between the environment and the individual. That is what we keep hearing, right? So that is what it is. And then what does schooling do? Schooling broadens the child intellectually and socially. So intellectually, as you know, it is IQ. So he needs to know, she needs to know so many things about, what happens if you do this, what happens if you do that. Everything cannot be experienced, so you need books, you need borrowed knowledge for that. And then socially, yes, social skill is the most important skill in a school or school atmosphere that the child should look forward to. That is one of the aspects where, this open university, open schooling kind of a concept, when it comes where these children are homeschooled, that is one aspect that they miss out. So parents have to make a very conscious effort to kind of bridge that gap. They need to have a social life with their peers or with adults, or to um, how to follow commands, or how to conform to a group. That is learned in a school. And the next point would be, it must be noted that education is not just literacy. So many a times, even educators make this kind of a blunder, where they think that education is passing on borrowed knowledge. But if you ask me, education is not passing on borrowed knowledge. It is just 20% of the borrowed knowledge that you're passing out. And the remaining 80% is something that you're inspiring the child. And that cannot be compromised. So literacy, as you know, is just a small part of that education. And education is a broad aspect that influences one's personality. It is a stepping stone to develop an attitude towards seeking knowledge. So, if you see all my MA classmates here, so somewhere down the line, one or more adults in your life, when you were younger, would have influenced you in such a way that you are seeking knowledge. You are seeking to better yourself from what you were yesterday. So this is what I think education is. So next slide, please. Okay. So knowledge is the, again, what is this knowledge? When I've said knowledge about, when I've spoken about knowledge in the previous slide, what is this knowledge? So knowledge is the acknowledgement and the acceptance of the unknown. So as long as you know that there is something unknown, you will have an inner curiosity in you. So to, kind of go and let me find what that it is, or let me not stop learning. See, the moment you stop learning, you start aging. That's what I, strongly believe. Next slide, please. Okay, in the book, they have spoken about primary abilities and secondary abilities. So, what else? When you design a school curriculum, or when you design the school timetable, what you basically look is, what are the abilities of the child that you're catering to? So, the first ability that comes is primary ability. Now, what is this primary ability? Primary ability is like learning your mother tongue. That comes through constant exposure of your mother tongue. Do you remember, putting great effort to learn your mother tongue? At least I don't remember putting such great effort to learn my mother tongue. And then sense perception. What is sense perception? All your five senses, like, if you touch something hot, you immediately pull out, no, you should not touch something hot. You see through your eyes, you smell a flower, and all these five senses are there. And the other thing is, but there was this, beautiful thing that I had read long back, that, there is this old tribe which says that there aren't five senses as we know. What are the five senses? Like, you see, you smell, you taste, you hear, and you touch. So these are the five senses that is universally known. But this tribe always mentioned that there are seven senses. And what are those two? Prash, I'm not on Facebook, okay? So
what's happening?
Okay, so what are these extra two senses that this tribe added? One was the sense of balance. See, this is so beautiful, I'll tell you. This sense of balance, as we age, we kind of lose our senses to a certain degree. If you see, old people cannot hear properly, their eyesight diminishes, and so on. And at the same time, their sense of balance diminishes. If you see, people who are staying alone, the greatest fear is, apart from other health ailment, it would always be that they will fall somewhere, they'll get hurt. So, in US, there are certain schools which will teach, like, I think above 70 or something, they'll teach these adults, senior citizens, how to fall without really getting hurt. They'll teach them balance, that how you teach your smaller kid, 1 year old child, 1.5 year old child, how not to fall. So same way they're teaching these adults, because they lose that sense of balance. And the other sense that this tribe, this sensible, tribe added, was the sense of intuition. See, this is something you can debate on, this is something you can agree or disagree, but for me, I have always regretted the decisions when I have, taken by sidelining my gut feeling. Intuition is what? Your gut feeling, something within you is telling, that is your senses. So this is again debatable, okay? So we'll not lay stress on this, but sense of balance is always seen. If you see around, sense of balance is something that people need to work on as and when they get older. Next slide, please. Okay, what are these secondary abilities? Now, primary abilities don't really need great algorithm or great effort to learn to, but secondary abilities like writing, reading, and playing an instrument, they need a lot of efforts, isn't it? We all remember how we were writing. When I was young, I couldn't write um, Ball, B-A-L-L, ball. I used to write B-O-L-L because I always used to miss out one L, and I always used to get that spelling wrong. But I still remember how much I struggled with that spelling of ball. So that is what this needs: effort, this needs guidance, and this needs an algorithm, a structure, repetition, or a particular 4-line book or something of that sort. So this is secondary ability. Here's one tip for you. Until children start schooling, that is before 6, focus should be laid on primary abilities only. See, this is very important. You should not rush a child to do lot of, secondary ability kind of a thing. You can give exposure. You can tell the child these are the things that are there. If you remember, when Dr. Anju took the class, there she was talking about how a child holds a pencil or a pen. That is called, that is something which I would like to call as monkey fist. That is, all the 5 fingers are into it. The child cannot bring down to hold it in 3 fingers or 2 fingers, which is called as pincer grip. So these things are very difficult for a child. And then you ask the child to comprehend and write, which is again, too many things for us to ask of a child. So I think you should wait until, they are really 6 or something, and then you should start going for these secondary abilities. Yeah. So please, next slide.
Yeah, that's why Mahatma Gandhi and many other such educationists, from that point of view, they used to say that children should be taught in mother tongue, because that's what they understand completely, and that will be their natural learning style. So I think that's where it comes from. Okay.
Yeah, that will come under this primary ability, where the child is exposed to it so many times a day that it will, kind of inherently learn. So this is what it is. I absolutely agree. But then logistically, that is a tad bit difficult to be followed in a country like India. Again, okay. So now, what is this role of schooling in the life of children? This is given by one Mr. Russell. So here in this, our IGNOU textbook focuses mainly on Russell and Dewey, another person named Dewey.
Yeah, John Dewey. Yeah.
Yeah. So so this what does Russell uncle tell? He tells that cultivation of what does schooling do? Cultivation of intelligence. Yes. So where you acquire other talents, where you acquire other reading, writing skills, and where your IQ is bettered. Technically, I'm saying where your IQ should be bettered in a school setup. Next, what does it do? Discover special aptitudes. Yeah, some children are very good with coloring. Some children are very good with music. So these are the things that will be notified in a school. Then learn all the base subjects as to know what to pursue and what not to. See, it is very important for us to know what we like and what we don't like so much. Let us not say hate it, but we sometimes dislike certain things. Like even in this group, we are not very comfortable. Many of us are not very comfortable with stats. But if you ask Praveen or Praharsh, those people are like, they'll pick up stats paper first. So this is what the schooling does. And then it is very important for us to know that exposure is very essential to filter interest and passion. See, if the child doesn't know, like in Indian sweets, if you don't know there is gulab jamun, if you don't know there is jalebi, if you don't know there is barfi, then how would you kind of say that, oh, I like barfi or I like gulab jamun? You have not even tried the other two. So this is what schooling should technically do. Another important thing that all the educators must understand is that severe mental effort should be avoided until the age of 7 or at least 6. See, forcing the child to write, forcing the child to, finish off, write cursive, or forcing the child to learn a particular rhyme, forcing a child to, read a particular paragraph. These are all these sometimes strain a child. These sometimes, put immense pressure on that young mind. So I think we should avoid such follies. Next slide, please. Okay, here comes our John Dewey. So this guy is amazing. Okay, so John Dewey, he was an American philosopher. He was also a psychologist and an educational reformer. What he felt, what should schooling be? So he felt that education needs to be centered at the life of a child. See, this is the most beautiful thing that one can ever say about children, that it should be around the child. What is the child doing? Let us cater to his needs, his level, and let us provide stimuli to his brain, and not otherwise. Because just because we are free, we can't put in so much of curriculum and so many things just because we want to act pompous. Schools sometimes have a weird competition with respect to your curriculum. Ours is, we will teach Hindi in UKG, then the other school will say we will start Hindi in LKG. See, that shouldn't be the kind of competition that we are looking forward to. Where is the child? Are you keeping the child in the center? No, you're keeping yourself, your school in the center. So that shouldn't be the way, is what John felt. And education should be spontaneous. Then this is how it is. I remember in one of the middle schools, a child never used to like mathematics, and he used to feel that no, maths is not for me. And then suddenly there came this amazing maths teacher, and what she did was, she called the child and she said, okay, come on, let us play football here. And then she said that this is how it is, this is the goalie, this is this, and she explained a math concept using a football game. Here there are two things. One, the teacher was spontaneous. Second, the teacher was innovative, and also the teacher understood what is the interest of the child. He was an avid football fan, to be honest, and then the teacher did this. So this is spontaneous. And I think every teacher should wake up in the morning and say, let me get up, let me go to the school and learn from the child. That is what it is. And teaching is always spontaneous. Teaching is fluid. It cannot be rigid.
Mhm.
And education must facilitate great interaction with the surrounding. See, there should be a congruence between what the child is learning and what the surroundings are. You cannot, once I had to teach a concept of planets. Now, this planets is something very alien to a child. Rather than, if I had taught the child about a vegetable shop or a grocery shop, the child would have related to it. But these planets is something very alien and very huge concept for the child to understand. All I did was, I told them these are the characteristics of a planet. Now, who all will become what planet? And you should have seen each child chose a planet, and they all knew what that planet was, and and they all tried to learn what extra features were there in that planet, and how that planet was different from the others. And unfortunately, there was one child who was Pluto. Now, Pluto is not inclusive. What? Yeah, we all learned 9 planets itself, but this Pluto, these days is not included in the our solar system. He is called the dwarf planet, and he's set aside. And this poor child is Pluto now. Initially, he was very, Chintu was very happy that, I'm Pluto, kind of a thing. And then he realized, oh, Pluto is not a part of this solar system. But what the other planets did was amazing. They said, it is okay, you also go around the sun, we will take you, come along with us. So that was the inclusive spirit of my class. And that is how children learn. See, the point is it should be spontaneous. And the second thing is, I wish, children learned more of what they saw than of something, that they found it very difficult to relate to. Again, see, he strongly opposed the idea of drawing out something from the mind of the child. See, this is exactly what is happening, like ratta maro and vomit it in the examination paper. See, this is not what education is. This will lead you nowhere. This is not about testing your memory. Education is about you seeking knowledge, and how much do you know. You have to evaluate yourself, and the child is capable of doing it in his or her own interest. And child is capable of seeking out his passion, and child is also capable of telling that, ma'am, I don't like this, ma'am, I like to color, ma'am, today I will sit, ma'am, today I will listen to a story. And these are the things that has to be cultivated, and they have to be inspired to seek future knowledge. Next, education must give direction to the child's activity. Okay, so suppose there is this child who is building blocks. Yeah, so he is just attaching one block after another. What a responsible adult can do there is, he can tell the child, see, listen, you can always build a castle with this. And the child understands, okay, so this is the activity of building blocks, and I can make a castle, I can make a hospital, I can make a grocery store, and I can make anything. So that is how you give direction. And the child will pick up like anything, and the child will be keen to upgrade his own skills and upgrade his own and expand his horizons. So this is what basically this quote means. Next slide, please. See, John Dewey. Okay, basic instincts. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah. So John Dewey, what he did, he said, you just observe the child and you just understand what are the social instinct, what are the other instincts that he or she has. So first one, what he said was social instinct. So what is the social instinct? Social instinct is shown in conversation, correspondence, interaction, and communication. How a child chooses to communicate. Does a child prefer to sit quietly or make friends, go around, make friends, or talk to them in his or her own language, or kind of dominate the conversation, or be an active listener? What does the child do? These are now language. Here he is talking about most importantly the mother tongue. Okay, so that is why he is saying that it is the simplest form of social expression, but the greatest of all but the greatest of all the educational resources. Which, and if the child is good at what happened? Yeah, good. So if the child, oh, thanks. Okay, so if the child is good in forming words, if the child is good in forming sentences, then he or she can use this skill to seek knowledge, to seek education. So that is why he put that this is the simplest form. See, you don't have to have explicit writing skills. You don't have to have explicit drawing skills to, make the other person understand. But you can just say, please, will you help me with this math? Please, will you help me with this English, or something of that. So that is why this language instinct is considered to be the simplest form. Now next comes constructive instinct. to make or to create. Now what happens here? You know something, there is a thought process, you can express, but then isn't it beautiful that to see children as well as adults to construct, like how Praharsh constructed a rocket after, from his assignment, I think. No, Praharsh has left the group, is it?
No. Yes. Right.
He was actually sitting on that rocket and going somewhere. He went to Pluto
Actually, a
and just
kindergarten
came back.
student.
Yeah. So that is what it is. See, you have a thought of a rocket in your head or an aeroplane. So what do? Let me make that aeroplane a replica of it, which is closer to it. So that's what you do. So this is called constructive instinct. Where does it start? It starts with free play, where children do movements or gestures. Then where does it come to? It comes to pretend play. And how do you do? I'm a doctor, I will do this, I will do that. And role play, and later becomes definite. See, as and when the child grows, it all becomes very definite, very clear as per his or her exposure. So basically, it is nothing but converts material into tangible form. So that the one that you can touch, feel is called tangible form, and where the thought is put like that. Where children create your Lego blocks or your kitchen set or something of that. So, say making tea or making pizza or something of that sort. Children play like that, and that is what they are doing constructively. And then there's investigation instinct. The child does not have much instinct for abstract inquiry. Suppose you ask a child, like, how much red is the red rose? The child doesn't understand what is how much red, what red. It is a red rose. That's all it is, right? But as it grows, then from where does this investigation instinct come from? It comes from combination of the constructive impulse with the conversational. So what is it? Constructive is here, the third point, right? And conversational is, where does it come? Conversation, it comes in the social instinct. And also a part of it will come to the language instinct also, where you're using the language, but most majoritarily it comes in the number 1 and number 3. Okay, so that is what it is, where you are kind of curious and where you are kind of asking what it is. And the other beautiful thing is the child will not differentiate between your carpenter working in your house or a nice experimental science lab, where people are there wearing white coats and people are kind of sitting there and wearing glasses, and high funda experiment is going on. No, the child will see a simplest of the simple um, constructive instinct in another individual, and he will have that investigation instinct instantly. So next slide. Yeah, the fifth one is the most beautiful and the most required one in the current educational system. It is called the expressive instinct or art instinct. What is it? It grows out of the communicating and constructive instinct. Hello?
Oh, sorry.
Anything happened? Huh?
Nothing. Carry on.
So it is very important. See, there are children in the middle school who are not very expressive sometimes. So they have their own inner feeling, their own turmoil, and it is a very tough age. So this exposure to art, what happens here is, I've seen children who cannot, kind of express it in pure English. They would express it in the form of drawing. They would express it in the form of, kind of dance, kind of drama, which sets them free. So this is the most important thing. Art sets you free, and it is their expression and also fulfillment. You have great fulfillment. You ask any artist, what is it? that you have done. It is beyond the canvas. What an artist feels is beyond a canvas. And what a dancer feels is she doesn't see the audience. She sees, she's in a different level actually. If you ask, some of the classical dancers, what do you feel? Even ballet dancers and all, you ask them, what do you feel? And they say, we feel lighter. We feel, the moment that music starts, we are not in this planet at all. So that is that expression that liberates you. Art actually liberates you. So this is essential. Basically, what we are saying is this art is also essential form of expression in a child's life. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, there are, so what are basic school skills? 3 R's. I don't know why they have named it 3 R's. It is actually reading, writing, and arithmetic. They could have named it raw, or they could have named it war, but they named it 3 R's. Okay. This is one of the classic example of lack of education, creative thinking. Okay. So by the age of 6, the child is exposed to the idea of reading and writing, yet he or she isn't perfect or wouldn't have mastered it. So they can't, as I told you earlier, because of the development of the pincer grip, they can't actually be forced to write, and they cannot be forced to do things which is physically not possible or strenuous, if I may say so. Next slide, please. Now, what is this learning to read? It is a basic intellectual skill. Yeah, reading is what? A basic intellectual skill. And performance in various subjects is dependent on it. It is first stepping stone. Because if you don't know to read, then you won't be able to write. You won't be able to express. So that is why it is the first thing. Now, what are the steps to help develop this? You name the object first. If the child doesn't know what the object is named, see, suppose in English, if the child doesn't know this is called a hat, then the child won't be able to think that this is a hat. The child won't be able to write that this is a hat. So that is the reason why he or she should be exposed to that hat. He or she should be told that this is a hat, and he or she should remember that this is a hat, and that is why he or she should be named. This consists of all the objects. He or she, whichever objects she comes across in her day-to-day life, she has to identify these objects. Only then she will be able to read and recollect and connect it. Then second is alphabets and phonics. See, most of us have learned ABCD like ABCD. No, that is not the right thing to do. You should know that it is alphabet A, but at the same time, you should know that A says A, B says B. So that's why we sing for smaller kids. We teach them in the form of song. This is big A, this is small A says A says A. This, what? Yeah. Phonetics, correct. That's it. I thought you asked me to stop singing. So.
Pradula, don't carry it away with the checks, okay? You're just breaking your train of thoughts. Just ignore your checks. Just focus on what you're teaching, okay? You're doing brilliant.
Thank you. So, so this is what it is. Okay, I think Raj slept. No, thank you. So so this is what it is. Okay, so basically this is how you're teaching. You should teach them phonetics. You should teach them phonics basically, or else they wouldn't know why that when A comes in apple, why is it apple? Why isn't it apple? And things like that. Why is it apron when A comes there? Why C when it comes in cat is ka? And these are the things that you need to teach them, not just because English is a very funny language, and English is very weird too in many places, like PUT put, BUT but. So it's very confusing for a child. So that's the reason why you have to set the base right. And when you teach them phonics, it is easier for them to read. Then C. C is like group letters and pronouns. See, you can club 2 or 3 letters together, and you can make them into smaller groups, and you can read. In adult language, what do we call it? We call it syllabicate. Correct? So that is what you have to teach the child. If you don't use high funder words like syllabicate. We'll just say, come on, let us group 2 letters, let us group 3 letters, and that is how you teach them. So this is very important, phonics and syllabication. Next slide, please. Okay, now this is my personal favorite. Read storybooks on a daily basis. That is, you are setting up a frequency. If you don't read storybooks, then it is very difficult for the child to fall in love with the books. So what happens when you read a storybook? You have to you have to ensure, as an adult, what do? You have to ensure that there is clear pronunciation. If you don't know it's very easy. Nowadays you have this Google, you type the word and you say how is it pronounced, and then the pronunciation is given there. And they even have this speaker kind of a thing where you can hear it out again and again, so that we have clear pronunciation, so that the child doesn't pick up wrong pronunciation. See, my in one of my younger classes, one of our English teacher, what he did was, he said stifle is stifle. Okay, you stifle a tear. And I caught on to that pronunciation so much that in one of the presentations that I had to give, I pronounced it as like that. Though, after so many years, I did correct myself saying that it is stifle. Still, on that day of that presentation, I completely messed it up, and I, kind of recalled what was taught in my earlier childhood, and I just blurted it out. It was, a cringe moment. So I think we should have a clear pronunciation, so that the kids don't pick up wrong pronunciation. And we should have adequate voice modulation. See, when you read a story, you should have enough voice modulation. See, you cannot have that vivid, kind of a monotonous tone, wherein earlier radio tones were there, right? Very monotonous, no high pitch, no low pitch. It's just monotonous. Children will not like it. You just try this adequate voice modulation and see how they latch on to it. Then the third one is emotional overtones in the text. That is, Cinderella was feeling very sad. So that is how you have to do. You don't emote that, the child wouldn't understand or go with the flow. The moment you emote, there is a picture running in the child's head, there is a video going on in the child's head, where he will see the emotion, where she will catch on to the storyline, and she will understand that emotions play a very important role in the storyline. So it is very important. Then right speed and necessary pauses. If you don't have the right speed, see, sometimes I have had these parents who at night, they are tired, they are basically tired, and the child is like, read a storybook, and they read it with that 3x speed. And if you read with that 3x speed, it doesn't serve the purpose. You rather close the book and you say that, yeah, I'll read it tomorrow. But then don't go with that hurry burry kind of a thing, especially with the child. And motivation to pick books and read. See, this last point I'll tell you, children imitate, whether they are in kindergarten or they are in middle school. They see your habits. And then if you are not the one to pick up a book and read, they will definitely not pick up a book. You have to make that effort. You have to ensure that you take enough interest in picking up the books for them, going for book shopping. And this is for lifetime. An adult will never be alone when she is surrounded by books or by nature. These two things will never allow your child when she grows up to be lonely. So these are one of the best, things to gift to your child, the habit of reading. Next slide, please. Okay, now comes the tedious thing. This is learn to write. Now, what are we talking about? These 3 R's are secondary abilities. Okay, so what is this learning to write? This has to be practiced like reading. Of course, it has to be because it is secondary ability. Then enables the expression of thoughts. So, what does writing do? It enables the moment you write, it enables your thoughts. See, there are certain people who will pick up pencil and a paper. They wouldn't prefer pen. So I have asked them, why would you prefer pencil? So they'll always tell you that, the way the pencil moves in a paper, our thoughts flow like a river. So that is the beauty of it. And, you have to pick up and you have to write. And you will see many researchers telling you that keeping a journal, if you have this habit of writing, every day for 5 minutes, it is very therapeutic. So people who haven't started can just start it off and, take a feel of it. Then,
Go back, Ritika.
previous one. No. Yeah, this one. Okay, yeah. So what are the two approaches for learning this writing skill? So Russell was of the opinion that study and good knowledge of literature. He said, chalo kitab padho, which is also true, right? In order to write or know new things, you need to read a lot of books because everything cannot be experienced right here and right now. So you need to experience. Just like planets, if the children were a little bit older, yes, they need to experience, they need to know what is there in their in the outer space. So that is why they need the books. So what do? So he was of the opinion that you need good literature and you should study, you should read a lot of books, only then you can write well. But what did he say? He said reading, writing and the oral usage of language can be taught considering that language is guided by reality, that is social interaction with the environment. So he said unless and until the child can relate to what he is reading, he cannot express it on a paper. So see here what happens is both of them are right in their own way. It is like writing 6. So one says 6 and the other person who is standing opposite will say it is 9. So it is right, both are right in their own way. And here both these things are right. So you cannot wait and expect that everything I see, only these things I will know. No, that you will be that frog in the well. So it is always better you read as well as you experience your environment, as well as you interact with your environment. So next slide, Ritika. Yeah. So what are the things that we can do to encourage writing skills? So first, writing should be relatable, either personal life or classroom activity. Who said that? Dewey said that. And then children show different purpose, take a different form. So what is it? See, like writing cannot be uniform throughout. Suppose I'm writing a grocery list. I cannot use the same approach to write a letter to my best friend, right? So these are two different things. The purpose of these two writings are different, and that is why they take two different forms. Third one is, okay, get children excited before giving the writing assignment. So you should perk the children up, whether they are in the lower classes or in the middle class, middle school. You have to tell them that why are you writing? See, writing is beautiful. Writing is, you will be writing this and you will have this attached. I will keep it on the board. You will write this. I will put it on the board, or I will, keep this in my file. And this is the purpose of writing. And you shall use this in your future life as well. And so on, so many things. I just said certain things which came to my mind. But then you can say so many things. Basic idea is you should get them excited to write, or you should act like ignore, right before 31st March. That's all. But that doesn't work with children at all, actually, especially middle school kids. Okay. So here the example that I have given is a teacher can give a blueprint, room for creativity and reward at the end. She can tell you can add your own creativity. See, creativity always, kind of perks up the child, and they will always, feel, okay, fine, let me write, kind of a thing. And then do not interrupt a child while he or she is writing, no matter how many spelling mistakes, no matter if her handwriting isn't neat. Please don't go and stop the child, because there is a flow of thought that the child is putting on the paper. So let the child write. Then avoid giving importance just to top students. See, this one peril of our education system is every time the top student first benches are like, praised, and their things are published and their essays are published. So this kind of demotivates the other students. Appreciate all the efforts in this direction. Every child which has submitted the assignment, appreciate that child's effort. Then plan reading and oral exercises around writing activities. See, always plan. The more the child reads, this is again, we are going back to Russell's theory, which wherein he says that the child has to read a lot of things, for him or her to put it on the paper. So reading and also oral exercise, how he talks. That means when a child talks, what does he do? He's collecting his thought. So that is very important. Even for us adults, we have to collect our thoughts in a way that there is a beginning, there is a middle portion, there is a conclusion. So this is how it is. Next slide, Ritika. Now this is the third R, that is called the arithmetic skill. So Russell never liked maths when he was a child, as there was a pressure to be accurate, correct. See, like in our stats paper, all of us, all the 25 of us cannot have 25 answers. There has to be the same answer, right? So this builds up a lot of pressure. So you are either right or wrong, and never interesting or suggestive. See, in other papers like literature and all, you are always, you can be creative. You can add your own words. You can use Queen's English, or you can use plain English. But then in maths, you don't have that liberty. And that is why, children kind of dislike maths. Then there's this interesting trivia that I gave here. Asian kids are found to be better with maths. Why? Because they're good at block counting. Like, they're good at counting in fives, they're good at counting in tens, they're good at making blocks of numbers and counting it faster. Then there is a generic fear of maths among children. So research says that, girls fear maths more than boys. It could also be the fear of being wrong all the time, or fear of the probability of being wrong. So the example that I gave here was, once I had two tuition girls who had come for tuition. They had come in their 8th grade, and they had come with one had a final mark of 51%, and the other one had a final mark of 63%. Now the moment they came there, I saw there is an immense fear of mathematics. So what I used to do, I taught him what was supposed to be taught. But then later on, every class, as and when they used to come, I used to ask them, who is the boss, math or you? And they used to shout like, it's me. And that is what, the only thing that I did extra from another teacher was to inspire them to conquer math. And they passed their 10th board. One scored 82 and the other one scored 94. So this is what it does. You ask any teacher who has inspired his or her student, they will tell you such stories, ample stories of this kind. So next slide, please. I think this is the last slide. Oh, okay, this one. Okay. So what do we do to have success with numbers? What happens, when you are good with numbers? Numbers improve speed. Yeah. So it definitely improves your thinking speed. Second, universe is guided by numbers. See, if you take any like say even the ragas, what we have, classical ragas, they have a specific count. You would realize counting it, or you wouldn't realize in the form of tala. But you might just simply sing a song, but that is dominated by maths. The underlying of it is math. So that is why universe is guided by math. We cannot completely live a life without math. Hence, we need to, focus on maths as well. Maths is very important that ways. And mental abilities are challenged. See, you are, always like, perked up to do math. It is not easy to do maths and then do another job simultaneously. This kind of, takes your focus, and this kind of brings you back into focus. And simply put, you cannot do too many things when you're doing math. You need utter focus to do math. And then stimulate to the brain, especially the left side of the brain. So when you're doing a calculation, see, for me, I learned trigonometry, which I haven't used it after giving my exams. Okay, but then I know for sure that it would have, stimulated my brain at that point of time, because it needs a lot of thinking and stuff like that. Then push ahead the advent of Alzheimer's. See, this kind of a mental, exercise kind of pushes back your Alzheimer's. This is found. Okay. So this is what it is. I'll take the remaining tomorrow. Will that be okay?
Absolutely, ma'am. Such a nice, interesting class, yeah, Mridula. Very good, yeah. Anyway, it was
Wonderful class.
expected.
Especially that voice. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's really
I
nice.
think you all made us, you made us kids